Okay, good evening, and we are here with Professor Galbraith from University of Texas, Austin. We just had a seminar with him about inequality, about tackling inequalities, and about the role of redistribution policies in contrasting them. Now we exploit the presence of Professor Galbraith here in Pisa to ask him some questions on general topics of politics and economics. First of all, we would like to ask you something about Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, especially which are the main differences among their politics and economical views, and who among them you think will win the primary elections in the Democratic Party?
Okay, well, first of all, it's nice to be here. The situation is somewhat in flux at the moment. As you know, Bernie Sanders suffered a heart attack last week, from which he is recovering rather well, but how this will affect the evolution of the campaign, we don't know. Let's leave that aside and just talk about the issues between the candidates. There are basically three candidates at this point who have a live chance of winning the nomination. The leading candidates are Sanders, Warren, and Biden. Former Vice President Biden represents basically a culture of continuity. I wouldn't even call it a politics of continuity. He represents continuity in the leadership of the Democratic Party with the Obama years and by extension with the Clinton years, in fact, a party which developed over a period of time to be, in effect, a Democratic Party of the major corporations, of the major financial interests in the country, with a residual loyalty of some traditional constituencies. This is, I think, a fading model for the Democratic Party. It was successful for Clinton. It was very successful for President Obama because he had the enthusiastic support of particularly the African American community, but of minority communities generally. But it won't work for Joe Biden, and it won't work partly because Biden himself doesn't represent anything that the American public is interested in of substantive positions at all to speak of, and because he's personally an aging artifact of an era which is passing. So that leaves Sanders and Warren. Bernie Sanders is a figure who has been well-defined in American politics for many decades now, as the one independent socialist in the Congress and the United States Senate. And he ran in 2016 and really astonished the American political scene with a very strong performance that was based upon the articulation of a small number of very clear policy positions. And these included major increase in the minimum wage, universal health insurance, that is to say Medicare for all. That's probably the most important of them. A position on free or debt-free public universities in the United States so that the student debt problem can be resolved. A strongly increased progressivity in the tax system and breaking up of the major banks. It's a reduction of financial power. Very clear, very clear-cut program, which had an enormous appeal because it basically spoke to the economic condition of younger Americans very effectively. People working for low wages without health insurance and under the burden of student debt. Sanders was receiving something like 80% of the young vote and the Democratic Party, and those people are still there, and they're 4 years older, and their position is basically the same. Elizabeth Sanders, on the other hand, is anathema to the corporate wing of the party. They simply will take any measures, as they did 4 years ago, to prevent him from getting the nomination, even if his health holds up, which is, we'll see how that goes. Elizabeth Warren has been presented herself as a progressive closer to Sanders than she is to Biden. And she has some, I think, authentic credentials for that role. She was not the establishment candidate for Senate for Massachusetts, but before that, she was the chair of the Congressional Oversight Panel in the financial crisis bailout bill. The so-called TARP, or Troubled Asset Relief Program, was enacted in the end of 2008. And that was not supposed to be a serious exercise, but she made it into work and did a really pretty good job of conducting and running investigations. And she became the architect of the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. And that's it's I think it largely been eviscerated by Trump, but it represented an instance of the establishment of countervailing power to deal with some of the abuses that the financial community was inflicting on a vulnerable public with respect to mortgage debts, with respect to credit card debt, with respect to other kinds of loans that people were being induced to take out under very unfavorable conditions. So she has, I'd say, some good credentials, and she's done a decent job in the Senate. In particular, she's very effective with witnesses in the hearings and so forth. In terms of her programs, my sense of Elizabeth Warren is that she has taken on some positions quite similar to Sanders, but with positions that are not as practiced and tested as Sanders. So one key example is she defined herself as in support of a wealth tax proposal that came to her from basically Gabriel Zucman and Emmanuel Saez. A couple of economists have been pushing this proposal, but there's a kind of amateurishness about it in my view. I'm an old congressional staff person, so I tend to think about legislation in terms of how it will actually work. And I see in that proposal and some other things a real sort of abstract idealism that will be very vulnerable if she gets to the stage of being the nominee. And in other areas, the difference between her and Sanders is that she is what you might call a reforming capitalist. She defines herself as an enthusiast of, or at least an adherent of, the capitalist system, and Sanders defines himself as a democratic socialist. And there's a distinction there, which shows up in certain areas. Elizabeth Warren is favors she's basically an enthusiast of the new antitrust, break up Amazon, break up Facebook, and so forth. Well, I'm not. I will say is that, the idea that I would have to go to 10 different Amazons to find a particular book or a particular piece of household equipment, and instead of having one, doesn't appeal to me very much. It doesn't seem to me like a very sensible thing, because the truth is these are networks, and they're more economically run as, let's say, public utilities. That's where you get this is a declining cost industry, so you can get out to the lowest cost price and then run it as a public utility. Strikes me as the right approach, at least as a regulated private firm. Not just break it up in the hopes that competition will work. It won't work. It will end up making everything more costly, replicating the management structures and the distribution, the servers and the distribution network, so it doesn't make sense. So it's the same reason why you don't have 3 or 4 different electric power plants competing with the same area. So I think that on the whole, between the two of them, Sanders is programmatically generally on more solid ground. Again, leaving aside the question of his health, and you're asking who's going to win. That's a risky question. I don't know who's going to win. The general view is that Elizabeth Warren is ascendant because she bridges some of the Sanders movement and some of the, let's call it the neoliberal movement in the party. My view is we'll see. Again, assuming that Sanders' health is reasonably good and he doesn't leave the race, then the fact is this will be decided by voters. And if you look at the financing and the organization and the age structure of their supporters, Sanders' position is extremely strong. Biden's voters are aging out. Sanders are aging in. And he's got, he's coming in first on the funding question, and it's all small money, which means it will continue so long as he's running. And his organizations are extremely strong. And they weren't there at all 4 years ago, but they've been building for 4 years. So I see Sanders as having strengths which the press refuses to acknowledge. Now, whether that will get test out really depends upon this imponderable now, which is, unfortunately, he worked himself down to the point where he suffered a heart attack, and that's going to make a major, obviously, effect on the morale of his organization and on the perception of his viability. But we'll see.
Okay, thank you very much. And the second question was something different. It was more geopolitical and economical as well. What about the relations between the US and China? We know that in this year there was a kind of a commercial war between these two superpowers. And what do you think? There will be a winner, or just two losers, or all Europe could be a loser, or I don't know which.
Well, it's clear that the U.S. has some capacity to inflict damage on China and on other upstream trading partners, but. Let's be realistic about the extent of that damage. China has the world's largest economy, world's largest population, and most of that economy is internal to China. China has a very large financial reserve. It has no it's not externally indebted. It's not vulnerable financially, particularly. It has in place a system of capital control, so it is not subject to capital flying. I'm proud to say that as chief technical advisor to the State Planning Commission in China 24 years ago in 1995, one of the things I succeeded in doing was to bring them high-powered advice that they should not liberalize the capital account, they should keep control over it. And that's what I think paid off for them. And very handsomely would be understating it. And China has a engineering capacity affecting most of its industrial system that it didn't have 25 years ago, it didn't have 10 or 15 years ago. Doing prolonged damage to the Chinese economy is not within the capacity of the United States. It can affect certain firms, and the valuations on the Shanghai stock market and that kind of thing. But the Chinese showed in 2008 and 2009 that they have the capacity to get through the world financial crisis. They can certainly get through a trade war. And then the other thing to bear in mind is that, I keep saying this, is that the Chinese have an extremely good intelligence service. Maybe on the same level as our friends in Iran, but they're very good. They've studied the world, and they understand. They worked out with scientific precision that the United States plans to hold an election in November of 2020. And that winning that election is the single thing on the mind of the incumbent president. Not because he's Donald Trump, but any American president faced with an election is thinking about winning it. That's all they think about. It's an occupational disease of being president of the United States. If you lose the election, you're out of the job. You have to win it. And from Donald Trump's point of view, or any American president's point of view, being tough is a good thing. And so he tried to be tough with Iran. That was got to be just a little too risky. So, poof, cloud of smoke, now we're being tough with China. Well, China's been around for 5,000 years, and it can survive the next 14 months. And it knows very well that in 14 months, the election will be over. And after the election, either Donald Trump will not be president, or he will still be president. And either way, he'll have a different perspective because he will be thinking about something else other than winning the election. And so likely the trade war goes away. If I'm China, I say, yeah, go ahead, do what you have to do. At least we'd rather deal with you. Xi Jinping gave him red carpet treatment. He came to Mar-a-Lago. They obviously have a relationship. I'm sure they're prepared to be quite tolerant for the next 14 months, rather than having to deal with somebody, maybe Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden, or even Bernie Sanders, who they don't know at all. And people they don't deal with. I mean, at least they know who the American administration is. So why should they be terribly upset about a few tariffs that might be imposed and some other posture? Everything can change once the election's over, and will, in my view.
So maybe